You know that moment when you're sitting at your desk on a Tuesday afternoon and you start doing the math in your head? Like you pull up one of those retirement calculators online. You start plugging in numbers and you realize if everything goes perfectly, if you contribute consistently, if the market cooperates, if nothing catastrophic happens, you might be able to retire at 65. Maybe 67 if things get a little bumpy. And there's this weird feeling that washes over you, right? Because 65 sounds far away, really far away. And you start thinking about how old you'll be, what you'll still be able to do, whether you'll even have the energy to enjoy it. But here's the thing that absolutely broke my brain when I first started digging into this stuff. There are people, regular people, not tech millionaires or trust fund kids, who retire at 50. Same types of jobs, similar salaries, same economy, same challenges. One person retires at 50 with financial freedom, and another person in essentially the same situation works until 65 or later, still stressed about money. 15 years, that's the gap we're talking about. 15 years of your life, and honestly, probably the best 15 years in terms of health and energy. My name is Oliver, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same patterns for decades. And this retirement gap thing, it's kept me up at night more than once. Because when you really look at the numbers, when you understand the specific decisions and behaviors that create this difference, it's not what you'd expect. It's not about earning more money, usually. It's not about getting lucky with investments, though that helps. It's something deeper, something that has to do with how we think about time, about sacrifice, about what we're actually working toward. And I think a lot of us are playing the game wrong without even realizing it. We're following the standard playbook. Work hard, save a little, try not to think too much about how many years we have left, when there's this completely different approach that changes everything. The math is wild, the psychology is fascinating, and if you stick with me here, I genuinely believe this might shift how you think about your financial future. Not in some hyped up, get rich quick way, but in a real, practical, holy shit, I need to rethink some things kind of way. So let's talk about these two people. Same job, wildly different outcomes. And more importantly, let's talk about what you can actually do with this information. Here's how this usually plays out, and maybe you've seen this at your own workplace. Two people start at the same company, roughly the same time, similar roles, similar salaries. Let's call them Sarah and Mike. Both making, let's say, $75,000 a year to start, both getting normal raises, normal promotions, nothing spectacular, just normal career trajectories. Sarah retires at 50. Mike is still working at 65. And when you first hear this, your brain immediately jumps to conclusions, right? Sarah must have inherited money, or she got lucky with crypto or GameStop or something. Or maybe she married rich, or she's living in her parents' basement eating ramen. There's gotta be some catch, some external factor that explains the difference. But what if I told you, and this is where it gets interesting, that the difference was just choices? Boring, unsexy, consistent choices made over 20 or 30 years. Because that's usually what it is. And the fascinating part, the part that made me obsessed with understanding this, is that the choices aren't even that extreme. It's not like Sarah was living in a van and eating expired food while Mike was partying in Vegas every weekend. The differences are way more subtle than that. Sarah, from basically J1, saved 40–50% of her income. Mike saved the recommended 10 to 15%, sometimes less when life got in the way. Sarah drove used cars, Mike always had car payments on newer vehicles. Sarah's house was fine, comfortable, but nothing fancy. Mike upgraded twice, following the real estate agent's advice about buying as much house as you can afford. Sarah took modest vacations, camping trips, road trips, the occasional international flight in economy. Mike did resort vacations, cruises, business class when he could swing it. And here's the thing that people don't want to hear, the thing that makes this conversation uncomfortable. For most of those years, Mike probably enjoyed life more than Sarah did. He had the nicer car, the bigger house, the more impressive vacations. He felt successful. He looked successful. Meanwhile, Sarah was driving a 10-year-old Honda and telling people she wasn't really into fancy stuff, which honestly probably sounded like cope to a lot of her friends. But then 50 hits, and suddenly everything inverts. Sarah does the math and realizes she's done, completely done. She's got enough invested that she can live off the returns indefinitely. She can walk away from the job, from the alarm clock, from the commute, from the office politics. She's in her 50s, still young enough to hike mountains, to travel extensively, to start a new hobby or passion project, to have energy. Meanwhile, Mike is looking at his retirement accounts and realizing he's got at least 15 more years to go, probably more if he wants to maintain his lifestyle. 15 years. Okay, so let's get into the actual numbers because this is where it gets really wild. And I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible because math can make people's eyes blaze over, but trust me, this is important. Let's say both Sarah and Mike start with nothing at age 25 and make $75,000 a year. We'll assume 3% annual raises and 8% average investment returns, which is pretty conservative historically for a diversified stock portfolio. Sarah saves 45% of her income. That's $33,750 in year one. Mike saves 15%, so $11,250. Already you can see the difference, right? But it's not just about the difference in that 1 year. It's what happens over time with compound interest, which is basically math's way of saying time is the most powerful force in investing. After 10 years, Sarah has roughly $520,000 invested. Mike has about $173,000. That's a big gap, but honestly, Mike's not panicking yet. He's still got time and he's enjoying his life. After 20 years, Sarah's at about $1.8 million. Mike's at $600,000. Now the gap is getting uncomfortable, but Mike's thinking, I'll work longer, I'll catch up, it's fine. After 25 years, Sarah's at $3.1 million. She's 50 years old. Using the 4% rule, which is basically the safe withdrawal rate that lets your money last indefinitely, she can pull out $124,000 per year without touching the principal. That's actually more than she was making at her job, and she doesn't have to pay for commuting, work clothes, or eating out for lunch. She's done. She's free. Mike, at the same point, has about $1 million saved, which sounds like a lot, but using that same 4% rule, that's only $40,000 per year. He's been living on $63,750 after his 15% savings. His $75,000 salary grew to $7,500 over those 25 years, but let's simplify. He cannot retire, not even close. He needs to keep working. 15 more years pass. Mike is 65. He saved diligently that entire time, never missing a contribution. He now has about $2.8 million. He can retire with about $112,000 per year. He's financially comfortable, finally. But here's what gets me, what really makes me pause and think. Sarah has now been retired for 15 years. She's been traveling, pursuing hobbies, spending time with family, doing whatever she wants. Mike spent those same 15 years in meetings, dealing with deadlines, managing workplace stress, watching the clock. And it's not just the time, though that's huge. Sarah retired with her health intact. She could hike, bike, travel actively. By 65, statistically, you're dealing with more health issues. Your knees hurt, your back hurts, you get tired easier. The kind of retirement you can have at 50 versus 65 is fundamentally different. There's this thing about compound interest that most people don't fully grasp, and honestly, I didn't get it either until I really sat down with the numbers. It's not just that your money grows over time, it's that it grows exponentially, and the curve gets steeper the longer you're in the game. Like, imagine you invest $1,000 at age 25 and never touch it. At 8% returns by age 50, it's worth about $6,800. Not bad, right? But here's where it gets interesting. From age 50 to 65, that same investment grows from $6,800 to about $21,600. The majority of the growth happens in those last 15 years. This is why conventional wisdom says it's never too late to start investing, but also why that wisdom is, well, not quite capturing the full picture. Because yes, you can start late and still accumulate something, but the people who start early and max out their savings rate in their 20s and 30s, they're capturing growth that's literally impossible to recreate later. Sarah front-loaded her sacrifice. She lived below her means during her peak earning years when she was young and honestly when material possessions matter less anyway. Think about it. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you're busy. You're figuring out your career, maybe starting a family. You're active and social. A fancy car or a big house isn't adding that much to your happiness. You're not home enough to enjoy the big house. The car just gets you from point A to point B. But Mike, he lifestyle inflated with every raise. He upgraded continuously. And here's the brutal truth. That newer car didn't actually make him proportionally happier. The bigger house didn't solve any of his problems. The fancy vacations were nice, but they were brief. And all of those upgrades came with a cost that wasn't just financial. They cost him time, years and years of additional time in the workforce. There's this concept in economics called diminishing marginal utility, which is just a fancy way of saying the more you have of something, the less additional happiness each new unit brings you. Your first car is life-changing. Your fourth car with heated seats and a premium sound system is nice, I guess, maybe? Sarah understood this intuitively. Mike didn't, or maybe he understood it but couldn't resist the social pressure to keep up. Let's talk about why most of us end up being Mike, not Sarah, because I think this is important. It's easy to look at Sarah and Mike and think, well, obviously Sarah made better choices, but it's not that simple. The pressure to inflate your lifestyle is everywhere. It's built into the fabric of how we live. You get a raise, your brain immediately starts thinking about what you can now afford. You've been driving that old Honda and now you're making more money and there's this voice in your head that says, I deserve something nicer. And you do. You've worked hard. Why shouldn't you upgrade? Your friends are buying houses, so you buy a house. They're going on nice vacations, so you go on nice vacations. They're eating at trendy restaurants, so you eat at trendy restaurants. And none of this feels excessive because everyone around you is doing the same thing. It feels normal. It feels like just living your life. But here's what's insidious about it. Every lifestyle upgrade you make doesn't just cost you money now, it costs you money forever. You buy a bigger house, you've now locked in higher mortgage payments, higher property taxes, higher insurance, higher utilities, higher maintenance costs for decades. That nicer car, higher payments, higher insurance, higher maintenance, forever. Or at least until you make a conscious decision to downgrade, which psychologically is incredibly difficult. So you're not just spending more money, you're locking in a higher baseline cost of living that makes it harder to save, harder to invest, harder to build that compound interest snowball that would eventually set you free. And the thing is, Mike wasn't being irresponsible. He was saving 15%. That's what all the financial advisors say to do. That's the standard advice. But the standard advice is designed to get you to a comfortable retirement at 65, not financial freedom at 50. The standard advice is a compromise between living well now and having enough later. It's not optimized for early retirement. It's optimized for mediocrity, honestly. Sarah, on the other hand, basically said, I'm going to live like a well-paid graduate student for 25 years, and then I'm going to live like a retiree with financial freedom for the rest of my life. She flipped the script. She front-loaded the sacrifice, back-loaded the reward. Okay, this section is going to get a little heavy, but it's important because I think this is the part that actually matters most beyond just the money. My uncle retired at 64. He'd worked his entire adult life, saved responsibly, did everything right. He was planning all these trips, all these projects. He was going to finally have time to woodwork, to travel to Japan, to spend time with his grandkids without rushing. He retired in May. He died in November. Heart attack, completely unexpected. And I remember at the funeral, my aunt was she was devastated, obviously, but there was this anger underneath it. He'd spent 40 years working for some day, and some day turned out to be 6 months. I'm not trying to be morbid here, but this is reality. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And the years between 50 and 65, those are good years. Those are active years. You can still hike mountains. You can still travel extensively. You can still have adventures. By 75, maybe not so much. By 85, definitely not. There's this concept called health span versus lifespan. Lifespan is how long you live. Health span is how long you live well, how long you're mobile, energetic, capable of doing the things you want to do. For most people, health span starts declining somewhere in your 60s or 70s, which means if you're working until 65, you're spending your entire health span working and then trying to enjoy retirement during your decline. Sarah understood this. She probably didn't articulate it this way, but she understood that time at 50 is more valuable than time at 65, that the experiences you can have, the energy you have, the memories you can make, they're fundamentally different. She traded nicer cars and bigger houses during her 30s and 40s for freedom and health during her 50s, 60s, and 70s. And here's another thing nobody talks about. Work is stressful. Even if you love your job, even if it's fulfilling, it's still stress. Deadlines, politics, commutes, performance reviews, difficult coworkers. That stress accumulates. It affects your health. People who retire early often see immediate health improvements, better sleep, lower blood pressure, less anxiety. Meanwhile, people who work into their 60s often deal with chronic stress-related conditions. So when we're comparing Sarah and Mike, we're not just comparing net worth or retirement account balances. We're comparing quality of life, health outcomes, freedom, autonomy, stress levels. And on all of those metrics, Sarah is winning by a landslide and has been winning for 15 years while Mike is still grinding. All right, so let's get practical. What did Sarah actually do that was different from Mike? Because I think a lot of people here save 45% of your income and just immediately think that's impossible and mentally check out. But let me break down how this actually works. First, she automated everything immediately. Sarah never saw the money she was saving. It came out of her paycheck automatically, straight into investment accounts. Mike had to manually transfer money each month, which meant every month was a negotiation with himself about how much to save. Well, I've got this expense coming up, or I've been really good lately, I'll just save a little less this month. Sarah removed willpower from the equation entirely. Second, she had a really clear target. Sarah wasn't saving abstractly for retirement. She had a specific number in mind. $2.5 million, which adjusted over time for inflation. She knew that at a 4% withdrawal rate, that would give her 6 figures per year to live on. She had a countdown. She knew exactly how many years she had left. Mike was saving enough, which is a vague, moving target that somehow always feels far away. Third, she optimized for value, not status. This is subtle but huge. Sarah bought used cars that were reliable but not impressive. She lived in a nice enough house in a good enough neighborhood, but she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She took great vacations, but she wasn't staying at 5-star resorts. She spent money on experiences and relationships, not on things meant to signal success. Mike, often without even realizing it, was spending money to look successful rather than to actually be happy. Fifth, she focused on the big 3 expenses: housing, transportation, and food. These are where most people's money goes. Sarah ruthlessly optimized these. She bought a modest house in a less trendy neighborhood and never upgraded. She drove used cars and kept them forever. She cooked most of her meals. Mike, like most people, let these 3 categories gradually expand to eat up his income. Sixth, she had a community that supported her goals. This is the thing nobody talks about. Sarah surrounded herself with people who were also focused on financial independence, not in a culty way, but just her close friends weren't the ones pushing for expensive dinners out every week or weekend trips to Vegas. Mike's social circle normalized lifestyle inflation, so he inflated along with them. But here's what I think is really at the core of the difference between Sarah and Mike, and it's not about discipline or willpower or any of that. It's about how they thought about trade-offs. Sarah saw everything as a trade. Every dollar spent on something today was a dollar not invested for tomorrow. But more than that, she was thinking in terms of time. She'd literally calculate, if I buy this $50,000 car instead of a $15,000 car, that's $35,000 not invested. At 8% returns, that's roughly $75,000 in 10 years, which means I'm trading approximately 6 months of work for a nicer car. And when you frame it that way, the math gets really clear really fast. Mike thought about money as something you earn to spend, which is normal. That's how most of us think about it. You work, you earn money, you spend that money on living your life and making yourself happy. Saving is something you do with the leftover if there is any leftover. But Sarah flipped it. For her, money was freedom. Every dollar saved was freedom bought, time bought, options bought. She wasn't depriving herself, she was liberating her future self. And this is where it gets psychologically complex, because who's right? If Mike spent those 25 years enjoying his life more, driving nicer cars, living in a nicer house, taking better vacations, was he wrong? He had more fun during those years, arguably. He lived more in the moment. He didn't deprive himself. But Sarah's been free for 15 years now. She can do whatever she wants, whenever she wants. She's been traveling 6 months a year. She's been volunteering, pursuing hobbies, spending time with grandkids. She has time. And time, once you really think about it, is the only thing you can't get more of. I go back and forth on this, honestly. Part of me thinks Mike made reasonable choices, enjoyed his life, and will have a comfortable retirement at 65. Part of me thinks he made a catastrophic error in judgment, trading decades of future freedom for slightly nicer material possessions in the present. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but here's what I know for sure. Most of us are defaulting into Mike's path without consciously choosing it. We're not weighing the trade-offs deliberately. We're just following the script society hands us. Earn money, spend money, save a little, hope it works out. And for a lot of people, it does work out. They retire at 65 or 67 and have a fine retirement. But fine is not the same as free at 50. So here's where I try to bring this back to something actionable, because I don't want this to just be a depressing or frustrating story. I want this to actually be useful. First, understand that you probably can't be Sarah. Not exactly. And that's okay. Most of us can't maintain a 45% savings rate. We've got kids or student loans, or we live in expensive cities, or we just started thinking about this stuff way too late. That's reality. Don't beat yourself up about it. But you can probably move in Sarah's direction. You can probably save 25% instead of 15%. You can probably avoid the next lifestyle upgrade. You can probably drive your car for an extra 3 years instead of trading it in. You can probably stay in your current house instead of upgrading to something bigger. Every percentage point you increase your savings rate is a step towards Sarah's outcome and away from Mike's. You might not retire at 50, but maybe you can retire at 58 instead of 65, maybe 55. And those years matter a lot. Second, understand that this is about trade-offs, not deprivation. Sarah wasn't miserable for 25 years. She had a good life. She just had a good life in a smaller house with an older car. Mike wasn't drowning in luxury. He just had a bigger house and a nicer car. The actual happiness difference during those years was probably pretty small, but the freedom difference at the end, massive. Third, start thinking about your money in terms of time. That's the reframe that changes everything. When you're considering a purchase, don't think, can I afford this? Think, how many hours of my life is this costing me? Or better yet, how many days of future freedom am I trading for this? Fourth, optimize the big three: housing, transportation, food. You don't have to live like a monk, but you probably don't need as much house as you think you do. You definitely don't need a new car every few years. And cooking at home, even 3 or 4 times a week instead of eating out, saves shocking amounts of money over time. Fifth, automate your savings and make them invisible. Don't rely on willpower. Don't negotiate with yourself every month. Just set it up once and let it run. And sixth, find your people. If everyone around you is spending their entire paycheck, you're going to spend your entire paycheck. If you're surrounded by people who are thoughtful about money and focused on long-term goals, you'll naturally start making better choices. Community matters more than we want to admit. So here's where we are. Two people, same job, same starting point, wildly different outcomes. One retires at 50 with complete financial freedom and 15 years to enjoy it in good health. The other works until 65, finally reaches financial security, but has spent those 15 years in meetings and dealing with workplace stress. The difference isn't luck, it isn't inheritance, it isn't some secret investment strategy. It's just choices. Boring, consistent, unglamorous choices made over decades. It's choosing the $20,000 used car instead of the $50,000 new one. It's staying in the 1,500 square foot house instead of upgrading to 2,500 square feet. It's cooking dinner instead of going out. It's saving 40% instead of 15%. None of these choices are dramatic in the moment. Most of them feel like tiny sacrifices, or honestly, not even sacrifices at all once you get used to them. But they compound, they add up, and at some point they hit critical mass, and suddenly you're free. I think about this a lot because I'm not perfect at this. I'm not Sarah. I've made plenty of Mike-like decisions, but I'm trying to move in Sarah's direction, incrementally, because I've done the math now. I've seen what 15 years of extra freedom looks like. I've thought about what it means to retire with your health intact versus retiring when you're already dealing with age-related decline. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night in a good way now. It's not too late. For most of us, it's not too late to start moving toward Sarah's path. Maybe you won't retire at 50, maybe it'll be 58 or 62, but every year you shave off is a year gained. Every increase in your savings rate is a step toward freedom. The standard path, work until 65, hope you have enough, enjoy retirement if your health holds out, is fine. Millions of people do it, but it's not the only path. And now that you know there's an alternative, now that you've seen the math and the trade-offs, you can't unknow it. You're going to make a choice, whether you realize it or not. Every spending decision is a choice between enjoying something now and buying time later. Every lifestyle upgrade is a choice between comfort today and freedom tomorrow. And the beautiful, frustrating, empowering thing is that it's your choice. Nobody's making it for you. Sarah chose time. Mike chose comfort. Both got what they optimized for. The question is, what are you optimizing for? I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to preach or judge, but I will say this. Time is the one thing you can't get back. Money you can earn again. Things you can replace. Experiences you can repeat. But time, once it's gone, it's gone. And the years between 50 and 65, those active, healthy, energetic years, they're worth considering. They're worth planning for. They're worth making different choices for. So maybe you can't be Sarah, but you can probably move in her direction. And that movement, that shift, that reorienting toward freedom instead of just comfort, that might be the most important financial decision you ever make. Think about it. Run your own numbers. Figure out your trade-offs. And then choose deliberately, consciously, with full awareness of what you're trading and what you're getting in return. Because 15 years matters. Your 50s matter. Your health matters. Your freedom matters. And you get to decide what matters most.